Well, good morning, everybody. Thought we'd start off with a little theme music, a little warm-up music there before we get going. I'm Dr. Jason Galea, and my colleague, Dr. Peter Papadegenis, are happy to welcome you all to yet again another one of our webinars where we're going to be discussing with you what it means to perform under pressure. And it's exciting to hear and speak to a few people this morning who are listening today and who are joining us today, who they themselves are getting ready to perform under pressure. So for any of you who are listening and partaking today that will be competing in this weekend's Toronto Marathon, congratulations on getting there and good luck. And enjoy the whole process. And I hope you enjoy the beautiful views of our beautiful city. So way to go and keep on going. And God bless. This is exciting. So today, our agenda is as such. We're going to just say a few hellos. We're going to talk a little bit about the impact of pressure, the importance of preparation for performing in pressure situations. And we also want to talk a little bit about what do you need to do before, during, and even after a competition so that you can have effective strategies as to prepare yourself for the pressure that you're about to undergo. And it's truly important for us all to understand that pressure is part of competition, but it's also part of the fun of what exists in that which we do in any sport. Performing under pressure is something that we should all look forward to rather than fear. And if we can put that in the front of our brain, that this is part of the fun rather than part of the fear, we're taking what we feel as pressure and we're spinning it into a much, much different direction that's going to be so much more empowering. And then sure enough, at the very end, we're going to have a few Q&As and wrap up. So just a little bit about us. Peter is a professor at several universities in Toronto, York University, and the University of Guelph-Humber, as well as Sheridan. He's a sports psychologist that also works at one of the top sports clinics in Toronto and is working with athletes of all different ages, levels, and sizes, from those who are Olympic hopefuls to those who are participating in the Olympics at the national level, as well as professional. He's a former Division I athlete himself, and he is one of our co-founders of Headset. I myself work as a sports psychologist in San Diego, California. Not to rub it in, but our weather is always beautiful. I've had the opportunity to work with some of the most amazing athletes on the planet, whether it be those in the NHL, NFL, Major League Baseball, or the NCAA. But as of late, I've been also very fortunate to work with some elite athletes in the form of those who protect the United States in the form of special service. And what I mean by that is people from Navy SEALs to those who are airborne rangers. It's an amazing population to deal with, and they too are some of the most elite athletes on the planet. I too am a former Division I athlete and a co-founder of Headset. So what is Headset? We are a mental training platform that's developed by sports psychologists, coaches, and athletes. We've gotten their input as to what they need, what they use, and what they do when they're working with athletes or when they're trying to prepare athletes to be their best. And from that, we've been able to take everything that we've compiled in terms of research and hands-on information, hands-on technical things that we've done in private practice for over 10 years each. We've combined that with artificial intelligence and been able to create a customized program that's data-driven for every athlete that uses Headset. We look at 5 specific pillars, and we'll touch base on what those 5 pillars are throughout the day. But it's really important that you understand what makes Headset so unique is that if you're a part of a team, Headset would not only go in and help each and every individual, but they would do such in a way where we're able to treat every athlete as an individual, looking at his or her personal needs and where they are in their season or training at that moment. thus making it a customized product for every single athlete. So today, we're here to talk about the impact of pressure and performing under pressure. And with that, I introduce my colleague, our co-founder and partner, Dr. Peter Papadopoulos.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon for people who are in the Eastern time zone. And as Jay mentioned, that we are fortunate to work with many different athletes and athlete groups, but what they all have in common, especially the competitive athletes, are the pressure components. So being able to, and as we mentioned in the advertisement for the webinar is being prepared to perform at your very best when it counts the most. And a lot of athletes, they want this, the desire to, when the situation is at its highest in regards to pressure, that you want to come through. What we have in regards to Headset, and as Jay mentioned, our private practice work, a lot of athletes desire this, but they don't actually prepare for it. They'll prepare physically, they'll put all the physical, they'll put the technical, the nutrition pieces together in getting ready for pressure situations, but mentally they don't, right? Or very few people do. And for Jay and I, and for people that work with us at Headset, it's really deliberate practice. So being deliberate with your own recipe to take on those pressure situations. And those pressure situations are different for different people in these different sports that we're going to talk about. And we have a great group that registered. We have, as was mentioned earlier, we have runners, and some getting ready for a marathon this weekend. We have soccer or football players who are here. We have hockey players who are present. Parents of basketball players, some basketball players who are with us. So we're all trying to help support the athlete, and the athlete's trying to support themselves. But what we do know is that when pressure is present, so whatever that situation is, there are changes. And as Jay mentioned, that we have to reframe it. Like the changes that happen prepare us to perform at these highest levels. A lot of times we talk about these challenges as being negative, and we have to reframe it, but there are changes, right? And as put forward in the slide, hopefully everyone can see it, is that when pressure increases, there are physical changes and there are mental changes. But it's these changes that happen that we have to prepare and work with. And I think that's the important part. The reframing is, let's work with these changes that happen to perform at our very best. At the very bottom, we have performance consequences. We want these consequences to be something that's beneficial for us. And a lot of time we talk about the ones that are negative. But physical changes, you'll have hormonal changes. But these are hormonal changes to prepare us. Our heart rate increases to prepare us. Our muscles tense up to prepare us to perform physically. But when the pressure is too much or our resources aren't there, then we have those negative consequences. And mentally, what happens is we narrow our focus. It becomes more internal. We chunk the information. So we get a little bit more simplistic with our cognition. And that's what we don't want. But I think we can all appreciate, as we think back to times when we performed well under pressure and when we haven't. I think we've all can say or nod or put an emoji up of when there are times when we performed well under pressure. And then there are times when we haven't. All of us have, including Jay and I. There are times, and we have our own stories. But for us, it's consistency. Can you take on pressure situations that are consistent with how you want to perform? And that's kind of where we're going with this. This next PowerPoint slide, I'll let you do your own research. I still like using these two examples because they happen around the same time. There are two women who played NCAA sport. One was a basketball player, Didi Jurganin is on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is Elizabeth Lambert. Didi was a university basketball player for Xavier, and then Elizabeth Lambert was a soccer player for New Mexico. But both of these videos, I'll let you kind of take a look at it, both went viral because of how they didn't perform well under pressure. And there are two different situations. So I'll let you look up both of these, write down the names. I think you'll be interested in the videos, and you're going to see how they didn't perform well under pressure. This is not to say that they haven't performed well under pressure. Again, with YouTube videos, and they're snippets, little snippets, but they're great examples. And I know we have our own examples of when we have and when we haven't. But we're going to talk about today before during, and after, and it's the mental preparation piece. And as we both have mentioned, a lot of athletes don't prepare. So we're going to look at it before, during, and after. And at any time, if you want to use the chat function, please feel free, put your questions forward. If you want to unmute yourself, if you feel comfortable, please put those questions forward as well. Let's have a conversation along the way and learn with each other. So we're going to start with the before, and I'm going to actually push you for some feedback here. And I like using this strategy or experiential exercise when talking to athletes. So hopefully you can kind of see what you have on your screen here. If you can't, I'll make it a little bit bigger, but this is a document that I will use with athletes, and I've used it, no joke, thousands of times, right? In regards to the amount of people who I've put this forward. And I just have words, and I ask athletes, when you performed well under pressure, select 3 to 5 words that described how you felt when you performed well under pressure. And then pick 3 to 5 words that would describe you when you haven't performed well under pressure. Again, just I have a lot of data from previous experiences using this word list, but I want to just throw it out to you. So let's go first with when you perform well under pressure. So what would be the words that describe you when performing well under pressure? And let's give it like 30 seconds. Take a look through the list. Hopefully it's big enough that you can see it. And then if you want to do the chat or unmute yourself, let's just find those. And I think that's a good starting point for us. So I'll give you like 30 seconds, then ask for some of your responses. And let's put our list together, right? Let's see if it's different from all the other athletes that we've worked with, Jay and I. Let's see if we're on track or not with all these other athlete groups. All right, see some people in the chat. What do we have? Now I'll keep track of these too. I'll write these down. Just that. Jay, what do we have? Anything so far?
Yeah, we have some really good ones here. We have ones that say panicky,
okay,
confident, exhilarated, determined, inspired, motivated. I like this one. It's alert, fast, and aggressive. Another one that's great that just popped up was exhilarated, stimulated, intense. These are great.
These are great, and these are the ones, right? So there's the only ones that I would say that I'd have a conversation with groups. I've heard these all before, which is awesome, right? So we're just adding to it. So it's the motivation piece, excited, stimulated, confident is another one. So that confidence, that piece where you feel comfortable with yourself, right? So that's one. Another one that people, and I don't know if it's in, I haven't checked, I just kind of heard Jay what you mentioned. Another groups that talk about this also say relaxed. That's another one you hear a lot. So this is no different. I would just add relaxed and assertive. The aggressiveness piece, it's that assertiveness, the intensity, we kind of talk about that one through, but these are all the ones that people say over time. It doesn't matter what sport, of different ages, let's say 12 and above, and across sports, they all say the same thing. And I like to tell athletes, including the ones who are preparing to perform, that's how you want to perform, right? It doesn't mean that we're going to have all these words, but those are the words to remember, right? And we have to, when people perform best under pressure, they feel this way, including a little bit panicky or nervous. That's the other one, right? So it's not just cool, confident, but it's feeling confident, relaxed, but also a little nervous and having that energy, right? So a lot of times when people feel nervous, they go, oh no, that's the word that everyone talks about when they perform their best under pressure. So remember these in regards to the strategies of your own strategy. You want to be able to get closer to these words that describe you, because that's what everyone who I've talked to over the last few years have said the same thing with this document. So I don't know, and let us know if you want us to repeat those, we can. But if you have those down, just remember those when you're working with athletes if you're an athlete yourself, remember those words, because those are the words you strive for to perform well under pressure.
It's amazing at the same time, Pete, how much people talk about the power of nervousness. And that power of nervousness can sometimes be just an exhilarating force if channeled the right way. Our senses are heightened. We're ready to jump in a blink of an eye. And again, it's not always something that should be seen as something that's holding us back, but it could be seen as rocket fuel to prepare us forward. So for those of you who are working with athletes, nervousness can be a great thing. It can be a great thing. It could be someone who's not realizing that they're truly prepared for whatever may come at them. So just a little food for thought there to share.
That's awesome. And then let's do this, Jay. And if you don't mind, just as they come up, let's do the opposite now. Like when you didn't perform well under pressure, what would be 3 to 5 words that you would put forward? So let's give it again. I know it's a little bit of silence here, but let's give 15 to 30 seconds. Just think about it. Let's go with the other side in regards to not performing well under pressure. What 3 to 5 words symbolize those? And feel free to put them in the chat. Unmute yourself. Anyone's coming through?
Yeah, there's some interesting ones here, like doubtful, uncertain, apprehensive. Apprehensive comes up twice.
Yes.
Inactive, depressed, strained.
Lovely.
There's some interesting ones here, like
those are the ones. Those are no different. Indecisive comes up, uncertain comes up, right? So the words that everyone is using today are the ones that the majority of athletes say when using this. And here's where, and this is why I love starting with this, with our conversation today. We strive for those words that we talked about earlier with the performing well under pressure, but it's okay to feel those ways that describe when you don't, because you can acknowledge them and say, I feel this way, then how am I going to change them to be able to get to those other words, right? So if I feel jittery, okay. If I feel uncertain, if I feel indecisive, what can I do physically and mentally to get me to those other words of feeling relaxed, of feeling stimulated, right? And when asking athletes, when do you want to feel these words that symbolize great performances? When you perform, right? That's when you want to feel this way. You don't want to feel it 5 days before, 7 days. It feels good, but you want to feel that way when you perform. So remember the words, the descriptors, and then how do we work to get from one group of words to those other ones? Because those are the ones that people say over time are those most important words. So yeah, so I'm gonna go to the next slide and go through some strategies. But any thoughts? Are people, like, if you want to mute yourself, if people, any additional kind of thoughts, comments, or are we okay to move on?
Yeah, you totally move on. There's some interesting words that popped up from some of our people here. Words like dispirited and tense. And it's a really interesting point that we're discussing here, in that you can control feelings. I don't think we talk about that so much. I think we tend to look at feelings as something that hits us, something that falls upon us, something that is, looming above per se, and that we can control.
And with those emotions and feelings. Yeah, and with those emotions and feelings, Jay, it's a lot of times athletes will talk about them as being negative, but how do you use them? How do you use anger? How do you use frustration? For the marathoners who are here, you're going to feel frustrated. Sorry to break it to you, right? You're going to feel frustrated. You're going to feel some of these words, but then how do you deliberately work on taking those on? And then you have to do it before time, right? And this is the before part. A lot of times We talk with athletes about the during, right? Taking on the challenges during, but a lot of it has to be done before, right? So if you're able to do it before, then you are able to, because you practice this before, right? And I think that's very important. And that's the big reason for the before part of our talk today. But one that I really want to bring in, and even for people who are getting ready to perform this weekend, a pre-performance routine or plan is absolutely essential. But then every athlete has their own pre-performance plan. Because when people feel nervous, when people feel that they don't have what it takes in the moment to take on pressure, going to a routine makes you feel a lot more in control. A lot of times athletes will talk about their pre-performance plan or routine as rituals. I'm wearing my favorite shirt, my favorite socks, my favorite sweatbands. And I go, well, great. And how does that make you feel? And that's important. But our pre-performance plan has to be deliberate, and it has to be specific to get us to those words. Because a lot of times the favorite socks don't help you when you feel despair, right? But a routine actually does, right? I'm going to do this particular part of my routine because it will help me become relaxed, part of those words. I'm going to do this part of my routine because it will help me remain confident, right? So your pre-performance plan must be specific to you, but also to the words that we talked about before. And if you don't feel like those words, your plan should be in place to get you closer to those words, right? Because you're doing your pre-performance plan before you run, before you skate, before you throw a football, before you strike in soccer, right? So that's an important part here. And this could be another webinar in regards to pre-performance plan, but I would work on having a deliberate pre-performance plan. And here's just an example of one from an athlete that I've worked with before, and we have these in headset as well, that you have to be able to put down and then be very specific. I'm going to do this for 5 minutes, do this for 10 minutes. There is some flexibility, but it's really important to be deliberate with your plan.
So Pete, we have a question that
Yeah.
popped up and actually a really good response as well. One of our people has asked, as a first-time marathoner, just curious where the frustration will come from. And the response provided was one that says, when you hit the wall, frustration may come with it.
Yeah.
So maybe to touch base on the first feeling of frustration, where does that come from?
Yeah, and it could be at different times. And the wall is the one that people talk about a lot, that 36-kilometer mark for the people who are running in Canada. The Toronto one's coming up, we're talking about that. But that wall area is where you're physically depleted, and that's gonna be frustrating, right? Mm-hmm. But also other times people may feel frustrated being stuck behind certain people. You might see people pass you that might make you frustrated, right? There are going to be times when you don't feel like your very best, or you might be behind in some of the times that you have. So, and again, there's different, and we'll talk about different sources of pressure or frustration a little bit later today, but I'd be deliberate. Like, as you have run and trained or previous marathons, when have been those sources of pressure or frustration that comes along, and then how are you going to deal with them? And the wall is one, right? But maybe we can come back to this with more strategies and then layer them on top, right? So as we kind of go through, let's layer them on top. But a long-winded answer is there are different times for different people with these frustrations. It's just knowing what those are for yourself, and then how are you going to deal with them? That's really important. A great question. Awesome question. Well, let's come back to it, right? Maybe we can add some layers onto it and work all together on this. Another before in getting ready for pressure situations, at Headset, we call these the bricks on the wall, but it really is reviewing what you've done well in getting you ready to perform under pressure, right? And we call these the bricks on the wall because we use a wall as a symbol, but it's actually called the 3-to-1 rule for us. Is tracking your performances in training in leading up to that event. And again, we're focusing on the marathon because it's happening, but you can use this for any sport. But I would tell runners, if I do see them on Saturday at the expo or even before, you have to track and remember your runs along the way. And the 3 stands for 3 things that work well in practice. And for many, they've had a long run in getting ready for the event. I would go, what are 3 things that went well for my last long run? What's one thing I can improve on? That's the one to look out for during the marathon. But think about all of the parts of training that worked well that you can then use as you perform under pressure, right? And that's really important because a lot of times people will just say, well, how was your training? It was good. And I will ask them, Jay, I know you do this too. Like, what was so good about your training session? Like, get very specific. Because when pressure hits, you got to rely on those aspects that have helped you get to where you are right now. That's what, when you're in a pressure situation, you have to hold on to something. And a lot of times it's holding on to what you've done before. And for a lot of people who are performing, it's training, right? It really is, because training comes before possibly your last time you performed. And for some, we may have not performed for like 2 years. So you got to rely on training, but reflect on the training, be very specific and deliberate. What was it about last training, 2 trainings ago, last week, 2 weeks ago? Have them in your phone, write them down. And I didn't mention it was on the previous slide. You have to soak them in, right? Visualize them, read through them, because that's going to help you when the pressure actually happens.
So Pete, we have an interesting question here from Cindy. Cindy, thank you for this question. This is a fantastic one. Cindy asks, I had always been training alone and I feel nervous when I had to run around so many people. Is there any advice on how to deal with that issue? And we have a great response here. Diani responds with, no, training is like a roller coaster. A lot of things to learn and proof during that period. So I guess the question would be, how do I overcome that feeling or sensation of going from training alone to now running with a lot of people around me?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say too, and Jay, was it Cindy? Is that the
Cindy?
person?
Yep, Cindy.
Yeah, and I would just say for that question from Cindy is, the more that you can stay focused on your own running, again, there's going to be a lot of people and it's a little bit different than training, but I would stick to more to the individual performance of your own, right? So, and that could go for all the different groups and people who are here today for groups being sports, that the more that you focus on your own, bring it internal. You can't go too deep. That's when you start to overthink things, but bring it more towards your own running. And it might be even more of the process pieces, the steps, like focus on your breathing, focus on your stride, focus on how your feet hit the pavement, focus on the things you're in it. For some, it's a little bit kind of different to say this, but for runners is appreciating it too. The scenery, right? How you're feeling, right? If you do have the music in, right? Like really focusing on your own movement and thoughts. And that's really important, but it's a marathon, it's hours and you'll get distracted from it, but it's always nice to come back into you as a performer. But that could be a hockey goalie, a soccer player, a kayaker, a mixed martial artist. It's still helpful to come back to you as a performer. And I think that will be just a little something that could be helpful.
I think just a little something to add on to that, excellent advice and insight provided to you, Cindy, would be something along the lines of on a strategic way of running your race this weekend is to separate yourself from the pack and find a good line. Find a good line where you can feel comfortable running on your own, if that makes sense. And not feel that you're being congested or boxed in or boxed out even. But maybe find a way to find a good line in the road, a good line in the path that allows you to give you that sensation that you are running alone again, if that makes sense. This is something that a lot of young riders who compete in road races and cycling often find a little bit nerve-wracking when they first start getting into those serious high levels of being tightly squeezed together within the peloton. In the beginning, what they do is to find a calm line that allows them to ride their race. And then eventually over time, they become more and more comfortable with the pack and being around the pack, and then being able to just be themselves within that pack, and thus not feeling so claustrophobic within that pack and held back. So I hope that helps. I hope that maybe fits what you might be feeling right now, and not only gives you some empowerment, but maybe a little bit of race strategy as well.
Yeah, and I like what everyone's saying, right? So it's going to happen because there's so many people, but it's bringing it back to yourself, right? And finding that line, and that you want to be able to cope, right? The best athletes under pressure cope the best. So if we have coping mechanisms when it happens, and you acknowledge it and go, okay, this is what they said on Wednesday. This is what the headset guy said. It's going to happen. It's happening. Let me bring it back to my own running. And you go, okay, got it. Right. And that's a comfort level, right? It's little things. And before we get to during, but here's another one too that might be helpful for all the different sports that are here in the athletes and supports of the athletes. If you're able to recreate the situation that you're performing in, helpful, right? So for those who are running in Toronto, go to the race route, drive it, bike it, walk on it, run on it a little bit. Where are the hills, right? Where is the finish line, right? So if you've not done it in a while or before, it becomes even more pressure when you haven't done it and it's new. So make it as realistic to the physical surroundings that are going to be a part of your performance. What does the gym look like? What does the rink look like? I tell people I love working with combat sport athletes. Go to the ring, go to the mat, right? It's the smells, it's the how much room do I have, right? And then you can prepare before time because you've done it before. And then include your mental strategies, the ones that we've talked about so far and the ones that we're going to talk about now, and add them, right? So no performance, even in practice or simulations, will be without its flaws. You want to have those so you can learn from them for when you are going to perform, right? So simulate your actual performance the best that you can, right? And then work on it.
Excellent.
Yeah. So here's the next. So we're going to look at during. The first one is kind of like a before and during, and it'll link to the other ones of when you perform during for strategies. So this is I call it the pressure identifier, right? It's identifying your sources of pressure. So I ask athletes quite a bit, what are your own sources of pressure, right? And you don't have to put these down in our chat, but think about them, right? So as you are a performer, what would be the sources of pressure for you as a performer? And then as you're thinking about the sources of pressure, when you feel those sources of pressure, what does it feel like? And for feel like, it's all in your body, right? So what does the source of pressure make you feel like physically? And then sounds like is your thinking. That's the sounds, right? It's your self-talk. It's the way you think, right? So if you identify these before time, then you can take care of them while you are performing. And then when they come up, you go, it's the judge who's judging me for the event, source of pressure. Let me take it on. Oh, it's that wall that they talk about, source of pressure. Let me take it on. It is the penalty kick in soccer or football, wherever you are in the world. I know it's a source of pressure. Let me take that on. So if you can, as a performer or a helper or support of that performer, think of the sources, put them right in your phone, write them out, what it feels like and what it sounds like. And again, you're preparing, deliberate practice. And it's okay because you are arming yourself, right? It's like armor. I'm ready for it, right? You are putting yourself in that position. So I think that's also a helpful before/during piece for strategies. This one, years ago, people wouldn't take this on and go, wow, this is a mental skill or a behavior. Breathing is one of the most important during skill to undertake, especially when the physical pieces are out of line with how you want to perform. And for those runners, I would work on breathing as you're getting into the corral. I would use your breathing skills as you're at the event before you go on, as you're warming up, as you are driving to the start line, right? But that could be said in your car or bus or plane as you're going to an event. Like if you're feeling it, you got to use your breathing, but you have to be deliberate with that breathing. You can't be doing the shoulder breathing, chest breathing. You have to do the belly breathing. I put this one on here. Most people I talk to, which it is a realistic goal when you're feeling elevated in your physiology. If you are feeling that your thinking is not where you want to be, 4 seconds, breathe in through your nose, expand your belly, hold it for 2, and then exhale out of your mouth for 4, 10 seconds. I always tell them, where are you going to take your 10 seconds? Right? Are you going to take 10 seconds during a timeout before you go to those free throws? I would think so. Are you going to use your belly breathing in the corral for the marathon? I hope you do. Right? So breathing to get back to those words that we talked about. The next one, another strategy during, it's called the 3 C's of resilience. We're going to talk about 2 of the 3. The 3 C's are commitment, control, and challenge. We're going to use the 2 here. They're called control and challenge. Commitment, we're not going to talk about today. For control, it's controlling the controllables. Often people, when they feel pressure, they think about things more that are out of their control, often the sources of pressure from that pressure identifier, than things that are in their control. Right? So those sources of pressure that people often come up with, a lot of them are out of their control. The weather, sorry to say, out of your control. Judges, out of your control. Coaches, even though you think it's in your control, often it's not, out of your control. So you have to start thinking about during, what do you have under your control? Right? So in talking about and getting ready for the marathon, it is about your stride. It is about your thinking. You can control these parts. For other sports, you can control your effort. Right? You can control your pre-competition routine. You can control your breathing. Right? So think about things that are within your control and then out of your control. Next one, it's looking at challenge. The identifier here for 3 C's is it's looking at pressure situations as a challenge versus a threat. So people who are resilient during pressure or after, they see pressure as a challenge, not a threat. So it's a level of optimism. So for me, it's all about the words that we use. Right? So when you are being challenged upcoming, you have to have words that you can rely on, not someone else tells you. You got to come up with words that help you undertake the pressure situation. Presence, I've got this. Process, belief, right? So what are the words or phrases that you're going to use, right? In your time of need. So it could be the breathing, the things under your control, with cue words that help you stay present. Because it wasn't mentioned earlier, and I should have earlier. When people feel a large amounts of pressure, there is that fight or flight. So when you are fighting, you're going more into that focus that you want to take it head on, or people just leave altogether. That's the fleeing part, right? So you don't want to as an athlete, right? You want to be able to take on, even though it's challenging, right? And these are important things. The cue words or phrases that are yours, start thinking about those, or help people as athletes come up with those, because those will help you stay in the moment. One thing, and I know we're going into this, and I'm gonna stop very, very soon here. I've got one more after, and I'll go through this very quickly. But I always ask, like, how many people debrief their performances after they perform? I don't know the exact number. I know it's very few, right? In a headset, we are deliberate with the athletes we work with. If you sign up for headset and you had to have an event, you are asked to debrief, because how are you going to find out how to improve on performing under pressure if you don't look to your previous performing under pressure, right, assessments? So if you are running this weekend, debrief afterwards, right? So how did you perform under pressure? How was your confidence? How was your resilience? How was your presence of focus? And then you can look at to improve it for the next event, but also for the next practice, right? So please debrief and have a debriefing form. It is nice if you have a trusted person within your sport to debrief with. If you have a trusted coach, family member, if you have a sports psych, if people use headset, they have us there with our algorithms to help them with their debriefs. So if you are performing soon, remember to debrief. Often, and the last thing for me, before we get into any questions, is when should I do it? For some people, they like to do it right afterwards. For others, they don't want to touch it afterwards. They want to give themselves a little bit of time, but you can't get too much time. When you start debriefing days later, there's a lot of interference with our personal lives being outside of sport. So if you don't want to do it right afterwards, give yourself a few hours, maybe the next day, but don't go too far. And for some, they like to do it right afterwards. And it's just a personal preference, but I would like for you to think about debriefing after your performances if you're not doing that right now. All right, that's it. I'm going to move forward, but we'll get to questions if you have them. And then we have a few social media pieces if you want to kind of have some support along the way. But any questions? I don't know if there are any in the chat. If you want to mute yourself, Jay, if you have any thoughts as well.
Yeah. I'll just share with you this, Pete, that there's been some great chatter going on in our chat boxes here with people who are here today sharing advice and insight for this weekend's run. So I really think it's great that so many of you shared some insight with each other. That's fantastic. One of the questions that was sent to me a little bit earlier is one that incorporates a couple of things that you've talked about, and that is it good to incorporate different forms of media when I'm getting ready to prepare for my race? And I think what the person meant by this is incorporating maybe video or music. And I think the point that we're trying to ask was, is it okay to be using technology as they prepare for a race, or can that be too much? That's what it sounds like the question was meant to be.
Personally, I think for various sports, being able to have the right media. So what are the videos you're going to watch? I would make them very specific to your sport, right? So if you are, and talk about simulations, record yourself, have someone take video of yourself and watch when you perform under pressure. So seeing your own video that are effective, taking on pressure in your sport, awesome. Yeah. Watch others who are similar that you trust, right? If you're a soccer player, watch other soccer players, but have it very specific. You don't want them to be too much younger than you or too much older than you at a different level. So the similarities, very helpful. Playlists or pre-competition, having the right playlist, helpful. During your runs, the right playlist. If we're talking about running, helpful. So I'm a big supporter of the tech parts when they're done right. It also has to be deliberate. Mm-hmm.
There's some great questions that just popped up now. I think it's because of the way that you indicated the importance of specificity when you're doing this. Shauna asks, been experimenting with visualization. Any key things to focus on as a beginner?
Yeah, just not putting too much pressure in regards to time. Like I would try for minutes. I would try to make it specific as possible to your whatever the event is. Mm-hmm. So if it's running, visualize yourself. I would pick out your gear already for Sunday, right? Oh yeah, like what are you gonna, just like you would have for other events? Like if you're a tennis player, what are you wearing tomorrow or today? Like you have to make it as specific as you can to your event. If you want to, as you're visualizing, like bring in pressure situations. How are you going to deal with them? You could also bring in those words: confidence, relaxed, right? Excited, right? Those words from that list earlier, bring them forward. Watch you feel this way. And I think from our chat today, just bring those in, and that will make you, the more that you can rehearse it, the more that you feel like you've done it, right? So it's almost like experiences. without actually doing the experience. And I think that would be very helpful.
I think you may have potentially already answered this question in that answer you just gave there, an insight. But Lisa asks, baseball is a sport where all eyes are on you. What strategies would you recommend for a player who tends to have an outward focus, meaning attention to how others are perceiving him, to instead bring his focus to the task at hand, making the play on the field? Great question, Lisa.
I would even say playing sports at one time with more in regards to others around would be, if I could do it over again, I would do this. And athletes that I work with would be, it's okay, you're going to be distracted, especially if you have that outward sort of focus, that it's going to happen. I haven't seen, even Jay, I'm sure with the special ops and the military people, you can't stay focused for as long as we think we can. So we're going to get distracted. Perfectly okay. We got to bring it back to focus. So if you're being influenced by external distractions, okay, I'm externally distracted. Let's bring it back more to me and back to my routine. So if I'm in the batter's box, the on deck circle, if I'm looking around and I'm getting distracted, okay, bringing it back to me, back to my routine, right? It could be from how I want my rhythm of swing to be. What are my thoughts in getting ready? So a lot of great hitters are very deliberate with their game plan. And again, baseball is a fantastic one for batters, pitchers, even the field work. Every time that there's a pitch, I tell the people in baseball I work with, every time you need to refocus. Jump, get out of the batter's box, go through your routine, come back in, get out. It's a lot of focus, refocus, focus, refocus. And it's going to happen for the marathoners too. You can't stay focused for 4 hours. People might say you need to stay focused. You can't. It's physically impossible with your cognition. So if we, like you said, Jay, if we can change our mindset to say, hey, I am going to get unfocused. I'm just going to bring it back. I'm going to cope. The best athletes cope the best. That's what makes them great, right? And it's just opportunities. A lot of times athletes, they put a lot of pressure when they can't. Oh no, I'm distracted, right? And I was very similar. I can't believe I'm distracted. Well, I am. That's just me. Let me get back to focus, right? So it's a lot more under someone's control. And it actually helps with that pressure along the way.
That's so true. So true. For so many sports, it's important to realize that what we need is controlled bursts of focus rather than this overwhelming, excuse the pun for this weekend, marathon of focus, shall we say. It's totally okay to let your mind relax a little bit and then bring it back to center. Totally okay.
Yeah, I guess just from us, Jay, and just a couple of things that we usually put on. Like if people want to follow us on social media, you'll find us Headset Sports on Instagram. Jay runs a fantastic podcast in regards to just different sports, coaches, athletes, athletic directors, pro, university, anything that we can get from the podcast that you can bring forward to you as a performer is awesome. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn. And if you want to try out the Headset app, we have a 30-day free trial. For those that are coming to the marathon, if you stop by the booth, we'll give you 3 months for free. So come on by. And then here's how to get a hold of Jay and I, right? If you want to get us a hold of us directly or at our Headset Sports email at any time, it'd be great to stay connected together.
Great. And with that, if any of our listeners today have any questions, please feel free to send any questions to us at any time. Great point here by Joey. It says, to add to what Peter said about visualizing not only the good parts, but the challenging parts in your performance. I found it very beneficial because it helps you question yourself and your coping strategies. Definitely recommend. That's a great point, Joey, to be thinking about the good and the bad that could happen so that you can respond quicker. Really, really, really good point. Shauna, again, love that you are offering that for us at the expo. Thank you. So this is great, guys. Probably one of the best feedback question QA that we've had in our chats in quite a while. So thank you all for participating so much. And for all of you who are racing this weekend, good luck. Have fun. Enjoy it. Enjoy the grind. And I hope that you guys will be able to tune in and check out our future events that we'll be putting on, whether it be podcasts that we're putting forward or even more webinars like we did today. We hope that you guys will tune in and take part and be a part of what we're doing. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, everyone.